Let's talk about something that's a bit uncomfortable, but absolutely necessary. Have you ever found yourself in a heated argument with your spouse, only to say something you immediately regret? Maybe it's a throwaway line like "you always do this," or worse, "I wish I never married you," and suddenly, the tension in the room grows 10 times heavier, doesn't it? Words have power. They shape our relationships. And once they're said, they can't be taken back. But the good news is just because you've made a mistake doesn't mean it's the end today. Let's go over 5 things you should never say to your spouse. Those words that can slowly chip away at your marriage and even start to erode the love that God has given you. And hey, we've all been there. But by God's grace, we can change the way we speak to one another. Let's dive into these. Number 1. You never. Have you ever thrown a "you never" statement at your spouse in the middle of an argument? Like, "You never listen to me," or "You always forget everything." It might feel like a quick way to vent, but in reality, it's a relational grenade. Here's the thing about "you never" and "you always," they're exaggerations that aren't based on reality. When you say something like, "You never listen to me," what you're really doing is invalidating your spouse's efforts. You're disregarding the countless times they've actually listened to you, which creates unnecessary conflict and frustration. Let's take Lisa and John. Lisa is frustrated because John forgot to pick up the dry cleaning again. In the heat of the moment, Lisa says, "You never listen to me." But think about it, John listened when Lisa asked him to take out the trash last week. He might have missed the dry cleaning, but that doesn't mean he never listens. It's important to reflect on the totality of the relationship, not just the one mistake that's causing the current frustration. In 1 Corinthians 13:5, we're reminded that love keeps no record of wrongs. This doesn't mean we ignore issues, but it does mean that we don't have to exaggerate them by saying things like "never" or "always." True love chooses to focus on grace, recognizing that no one is perfect, including ourselves. Instead of "You never listen to me," say, "I feel unheard when I'm talking to you. Can we work on communicating better?" This shifts the conversation from blaming your spouse to working together for a solution, reflecting the spirit of teamwork and mutual understanding in a marriage. By using "you never" or "you always," you're closing the door to grace and understanding. As Christians, we should be quick to forgive and slow to anger, and that includes being mindful of the words we use. You'll notice that when we let go of these absolutes, the argument often escalates, allowing both spouses to focus on what's really important, resolving the issue, not winning the fight. Number 2. I'm just like this, deal with it. Have you ever caught yourself saying, "I'm just this way, deal with it," to your spouse? Maybe after a little conflict or when they try to bring up something you're not willing to change. Here's why that's a relationship killer. This phrase can make your spouse feel like they have no room for influence or impact in your life. It's like saying, "I'm not going to change, so don't bother trying." Marriage is a lifelong partnership, which means both spouses should be constantly striving to grow and improve for themselves and each other. Picture Dave and Emily. Dave has a quick temper. When Emily gently asks him to calm down during arguments, Dave brushes it off by saying, "I'm just this way, deal with it." But what Emily hears is that her feelings and her concerns don't matter. She feels dismissed and helpless in the relationship. What Dave doesn't realize is that by refusing to grow, he's putting up a wall between them. In Romans 12:2, Paul urges us, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." This applies to our behavior as well. As Christians, we're called to continually transform into the image of Christ. If we hold on to a "this is just how I am" mentality, we miss the opportunity to allow God to refine us and make us more like Him. Instead of "I'm just this way, deal with it," try saying, "I recognize this is a part of me I need to work on, and I want to do better for both of us." This opens the door for growth and makes it clear that you're willing to improve for the good of the relationship. It's easy to fall into the trap of "I can't change" when we're faced with our weaknesses. But marriage is a partnership that thrives on mutual growth and transformation. By embracing the possibility of change, you show your spouse that their feelings matter and that you're committed to growing together. Number 3. I wish I never married you. This one is harsh, and I'm sure none of us would say it in the heat of the moment. But have you ever thought it? Ever felt so overwhelmed that you just couldn't see past the current conflict? Saying, "I wish I never married you," can feel like an emotional gut punch to your spouse. It undermines the foundation of your marriage, which is built on trust, love, and commitment. Marriage isn't just about the good times, it's about working through the tough moments together. Throwing out words like this erodes that commitment. Let's talk about Tom and Sarah. Tom gets upset over something trivial, and out of frustration, he says, "I wish I never married you." Sarah, hearing this, is crushed. Not only does she feel unloved, but she begins to question the strength of their relationship. What Tom didn't realize is that his words have cast a shadow on something that should have been unbreakable: their marriage vows. In Matthew 19:6, Jesus reminds us that what God has joined together, let no one separate. Marriage is a covenant, a sacred bond before God. To say, "I wish I never married you," is not just an emotional statement. It's an attack on the very foundation of the relationship. Instead of "I wish I never married you," try saying, "I'm really frustrated right now, but I love you, and I'm committed to working through this with you." This acknowledges the struggle but also reaffirms your commitment to your spouse. The power of words cannot be overstated. Once something is said, it can't be undone. Even if you apologize immediately, the sting remains. That's why it's so important to recognize the power we have in shaping our marriages with the words we choose. Number 4. You're just like your parents. Here's one that we all know is a big no-no. You're just like your parents. Let's break down why comparing your spouse to their parents is a relationship minefield. Comparing your spouse to their parents is a form of invalidation. No matter how well-meaning, it can make your spouse feel like they're trapped in someone else's mold. We marry individuals, not replicas of their family members. This comparison doesn't give room for the unique dynamic you and your spouse share. Let's consider Jane and Mark. Jane, frustrated over Mark's habit of being a bit forgetful, says, "You're just like your father, always forgetting things." What Jane doesn't realize is that Mark has his own personality, his own strengths and weaknesses. By making this comparison, she's diminishing him as an individual and reinforcing a negative stereotype. In Ephesians 5:33, Paul instructs us, "Each one of you must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband." This love and respect require us to see our spouse for who they truly are, unique individuals with strengths and flaws, not as a reflection of their family. Instead of "you're just like your parents," say, "I've noticed some things that I think we could both work on, but I know we can do this together." This way, the conversation stays about growth, not comparison. We all come from different backgrounds, and comparing your spouse to their parents doesn't honor their individuality. Remember, when you get married, you are becoming one with your spouse, which means building a new identity together as a couple. Embrace that uniqueness rather than trying to fit your spouse into an old mold. Number 5. You don't deserve me. Ever said, "You don't deserve me"? Let's talk about why this phrase is a major red flag in any relationship, and why it's a slippery slope. Saying "you don't deserve me" implies a power imbalance in the relationship. It suggests that one spouse is somehow superior to the other. This can lead to feelings of inadequacy and resentment, creating emotional distance between you and your spouse. Marriage is about partnership and mutual respect, not about who is better than the other. Imagine Anna and Ben. Ben, after a small disagreement, says, "You don't deserve me." Anna is left feeling unappreciated and emotionally drained. Instead of using their disagreement as an opportunity for growth, Ben has now created a divide between them by asserting that Anna isn't worthy of him. In Ephesians 5:21, we are encouraged to submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. This submission is tension between the couple and elevate mutual respect. Saying "you don't deserve me" undermines that, placing one spouse on a pedestal and the other in the position of unworthiness, which goes against the foundational teaching of humility and mutual submission in marriage. Instead of saying "you don't deserve me," try expressing, "I'm really upset right now, but I'm committed to working through this with you because I value you and our relationship." This approach not only addresses the issue at hand but also reassures your spouse of your love and commitment. Humility is essential in any marriage. Both spouses should view themselves as equals, partners who are committed to walking through life together. To say "you don't deserve me" is essentially a form of emotional manipulation. It can make the other person feel inferior, and that's not healthy for either person. Remember, marriage requires sacrifice, understanding, and, above all, mutual respect. The goal should always be to build each other up, not tear each other down with words that create unnecessary emotional divides. Let's take a moment to reflect. Marriage is a beautiful journey, but it's one that requires constant effort, open communication, and intentional love. Every word we speak has the potential to either build up or break down the connection we share with our spouse. As Christians, we are called to speak with kindness, patience, and love, as we are reminded in Colossians 4:2-6. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. Remember, it's not about being perfect, it's about being aware. We all make mistakes, and sometimes we say things we don't mean, but it's how we respond and work to change those patterns that really matters. Let's commit to using our words to uplift, to encourage, and to build up the love in our marriages. Let's remember the importance of grace and forgiveness, as they are the pillars that hold our relationships together. And with that, as we end the video, let me leave you with a powerful reminder from Proverbs 18:21. The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. Choose your words wisely, speak life into your relationship, and your marriage will grow stronger, deeper, and more meaningful with each passing day.